God said January 10, 11, 3rd. You will regret ignoring this prophetic date, not because the days themselves hold magic, but because moments carry meaning when God speaks and the soul is attentive. Throughout history, heaven has never shouted continuously. God speaks in seasons, in whispers, in appointed times that look ordinary to the distracted, but sacred to the aware. Many people miss their turning point, not because God was silent, but because they were busy, fearful, or unconvinced that the moment truly mattered. These days stand as symbols of divine interruption, reminders that time itself can become a messenger when God is calling a person to awaken, realign, and move forward. Regret is not born from failure alone. Regret is born from ignored instruction. There are moments when God places a gentle urgency in the heart, a restlessness that refuses to leave, a quiet knowing that something must change now. January 10, 11, and 3rd represent such moments, not to create fear but to stir responsibility. God does not warn to threaten. He warns to protect, to prepare, and to position His people for what comes next. When God speaks, delay becomes dangerous not because punishment follows, but because opportunity passes. So many lives are shaped not by what people did wrong, but by what they postponed. The dream that waited too long, the forgiveness never offered, the calling half answered, the faith that remained theoretical instead of practiced. God often places a timestamp on transformation, not to pressure the soul, but to prevent stagnation. These dates are reminders that obedience has seasons, and every season has an expiration. What you do with the invitation matters. You may wonder why God would speak through specific days. Because humans understand time, we mark our lives by dates, birthdays, losses, breakthroughs, beginnings. God meets people where they are. He speaks in language the heart understands. When He highlights days, He is saying, pay attention, be present. This matters. Not everything sacred looks dramatic. Some of the most life-altering decisions happen quietly, internally, when no one else is watching. Ignoring such moments does not always bring immediate consequence. Sometimes life continues as usual, which makes ignoring God feel harmless. But months later, years later, when the same struggle remains, when the same door seems closed, when the same emptiness returns, regret whispers. You were warned, you felt it, you knew. Regret is rarely loud, it is slow, reflective, and heavy. God is not asking for perfection on these days. He is asking for attention. He is asking for honesty. He is asking for willingness. Faith is not proven by grand gestures alone. Faith is proven when you listen before circumstances force you to. When you move before comfort demands stillness. When you trust even when clarity feels incomplete. January 10 may represent the day God asks you to let go. Let go of bitterness, of excuses, of an identity that no longer fits who you are becoming. January 11 may represent the day God asks you to step forward, to begin what you keep rehearsing in your mind but never start. January 30 may represent the day God asks you to commit, fully, sincerely, without a backup plan. These are not predictions carved in stone, they are invitations written in grace. God knows how easily humans drift. That is why He interrupts patterns. He shakes routines. He places markers in time so that the heart pauses long enough to listen. If you feel resistance as you read this, that resistance may not be doubt, it may be recognition. Change often feels uncomfortable right before it becomes necessary. Many people pray for signs while ignoring instructions. They ask God to speak louder while refusing to act on what has already been said. But divine guidance is cumulative. When small instructions are ignored, greater clarity is delayed. When obedience is postponed, growth slows. God does not compete with distraction, He waits for attention. These days are not about fear of regret, they are about hope of alignment. God does not want you trapped in cycles that drain your joy and dull your purpose. He wants movement. He wants trust. He wants partnership. Faith is not passive waiting, faith is responsive action. Look back at your life and notice how often change arrived quietly before it arrived dramatically. How many times did you feel nudged before you were forced? How many times did wisdom knock softly before consequences knocked loudly? God is merciful, but mercy does not cancel responsibility. Grace gives opportunity. Obedience gives results. Ignoring God does not make Him disappear. It only delays the version of you that could have emerged sooner. The regret God speaks of is not condemnation, it is sorrow over wasted potential, lost peace, and postponed healing. He wants better for you, and He speaks because He cares. January 10, 11, and 13 invite you to examine your heart. Are you listening or merely hearing? Are you believing or only agreeing? Are you moving or only planning? Spiritual maturity is not measured by how much you know, but by how quickly you respond when truth is revealed. God often chooses ordinary people and ordinary days to do extraordinary work. Moses encountered destiny during routine labor. David was anointed on an unremarkable day. The disciples were called while working normal jobs. Sacred moments rarely announce themselves loudly. They require awareness. You do not need to understand everything to obey something. Faith grows not from certainty, but from trust. God does not ask you to see the whole staircase. He asks you to take the next step. These dates symbolize steps, small but significant movements toward alignment. If you ignore this moment, life will continue, but something inside may remain unsettled, not because God is angry, but because purpose unfulfilled creates restlessness. Peace is not found in avoidance, peace is found in obedience. Let this be a time of reflection, not fear, a time of courage, not delay, a time of honesty, not distraction. God is speaking not to frighten you, but to awaken you. The greatest regret is not failure. It is never trying when the moment mattered. Choose awareness. Choose responsiveness. Choose faith that moves beyond intention into action. These days remind you that time is a gift and listening is a responsibility. God speaks because your life matters. And when you listen, even ordinary dates can become turning points that change everything. This is a divine wake-up call to pay attention to sacred moments when God invites change, alignment, and obedience, because not every awakening comes through noise or crisis. Some awakenings come through a quiet stirring in the soul, a sense that something is shifting, that remaining the same is no longer an option. God often calls His people not through thunder, but through timing. He marks moments in life when heaven leans close and whispers, "Now." These moments are sacred not because they are dramatic, but because they are decisive. They ask for awareness, not applause. They ask for surrender, not spectacle. Sacred moments are often disguised as ordinary days. They look like routines, responsibilities, and familiar surroundings, yet within them lies an invitation to realign your life with God's will. Alignment means bringing your thoughts, habits, decisions, and desires back into harmony with divine purpose. It is the gentle but firm correction that steers a life away from drift. When God invites alignment, He is not trying to restrict you, He is trying to protect you from paths that look easy but lead to emptiness. Alignment is not about perfection, it is about direction. Change is rarely comfortable, but it is often necessary. God's invitation to change is never meant to destroy who you are. It is meant to reveal who you were always meant to become. Many people resist change because they fear loss, yet God knows that what you are holding on to may be the very thing holding you back. A sacred moment is when God asks you to loosen your grip on the familiar so you can receive the faithful future He has prepared. Change under God's guidance is not chaos, it is transformation. Obedience is the heartbeat of these moments. Obedience does not always make sense immediately, and it does not always bring instant results, but it always brings alignment with truth. When God calls for obedience, He is inviting trust. He is asking you to believe that His wisdom sees beyond your present limitations. Obedience is not weakness, it is strength under divine direction. It is choosing faith over fear, purpose over comfort, and growth over stagnation. Many miss sacred moments because they are waiting for a clearer sign, a louder voice, or a more convenient time. But God often speaks clearly once, and then He waits. Not because He has withdrawn, but because He honors free will. A wake-up call is an act of mercy. It is God saying, "I care enough to interrupt your path before regret has to teach you what obedience could have prevented." These moments are invitations, not threats. They are doors, not deadlines meant to crush the soul. When you pay attention, when you pause long enough to listen, you discover that God's timing is precise and personal. He knows when your heart is ready to hear what your mind may still resist. Sacred moments ask one simple question: will you respond, or will you remain asleep to what heaven is offering? To wake up spiritually is to recognize that life is more than survival and routine. It is to see that God is actively involved, guiding, correcting, and calling. When you honor sacred moments, you step into a rhythm where peace replaces confusion and purpose replaces restlessness. This is why the wake-up call matters. Not because time is running out, but because alignment opens the door to everything God has been patiently waiting to release into your life. This is an inner transformation that begins when faith overcomes delay, doubt, and distraction, because the greatest changes God brings are not first seen on the outside, but felt deep within the heart. Before circumstances shift, before doors open, before answers become visible, God works internally. He reshapes how you think, how you trust, and how you respond. Transformation does not begin when life becomes easier, it begins when faith becomes stronger than hesitation. Delay is one of the most subtle enemies of spiritual growth. It convinces the heart that obedience can wait, that tomorrow will be more suitable than today. Yet delay slowly dulls sensitivity to God's voice. What once felt urgent begins to feel optional. Faith breaks the power of delay by recognizing that God's timing is intentional. When God says now, He is not rushing you, He is rescuing you from missed opportunity. Faith understands that waiting without instruction is wisdom, but waiting when God has already spoken is resistance disguised as patience. Doubt often enters quietly, not as loud unbelief, but as constant questioning. Did God really say this? Am I capable? What if I fail? Doubt magnifies uncertainty and minimizes promise. But faith does not demand full understanding before moving forward. Faith says, I may not see the entire path, but I trust the one who leads me. Inner transformation occurs when faith chooses trust over analysis, surrender over control. In that moment, fear loses its grip, and courage begins to grow. Distraction is the most common thief of transformation. It fills life with noise, urgency, and endless activity that leaves no space to listen. Distraction does not always look sinful, often it looks productive, responsible, and harmless. Yet it keeps the soul busy while the spirit remains untouched. Faith requires focus. It calls you to step away from constant stimulation and return to stillness where God's voice becomes clear again. Transformation happens when attention is redirected from what demands you to what defines you. When faith overcomes delay, doubt, and distraction, the heart becomes receptive. You begin to notice subtle guidance, gentle corrections, and renewed clarity. Old fears lose authority. Old patterns begin to break. You no longer move only by emotion or convenience, but by conviction. This inner shift is powerful because it changes how you respond to everything else in life. God is not primarily interested in changing your environment. He is interested in changing your posture. A transformed heart responds differently to challenges, setbacks, and uncertainty. It no longer panics when answers take time. It no longer collapses under pressure. It learns to rest in trust while still moving in obedience. Faith teaches the soul how to be steady in a world that constantly shifts. This transformation is not instant, but it is intentional. Each choice to trust instead of delay, each decision to believe instead of doubt, each moment of focus instead of distraction builds spiritual strength. Over time, the heart becomes anchored. Peace replaces anxiety. Confidence replaces insecurity. Direction replaces confusion. This is the work God does when faith is allowed to lead. It is quiet, deep, and lasting. And once this inner transformation begins, life is never approached the same way again. You no longer simply exist from day to day. You walk with purpose, guided by trust, and strengthened by a faith that has learned how to overcome. This is a call to action, a reminder that destiny often shifts on ordinary days when hearts choose to listen, because God rarely waits for perfect conditions to move lives forward. He works within the simplicity of everyday moments, in hours that feel routine and unremarkable. Destiny does not always arrive with ceremony, it often enters quietly, wrapped in normalcy, asking only for attention and response. The difference between a life that changes and a life that remains the same is often not opportunity, but awareness. Many people believe destiny will announce itself with clarity, certainty, and comfort. They wait for a dramatic sign, a flawless plan, or a moment free of risk. But God's pattern throughout time shows something different. He speaks while people are working, resting, walking, or thinking. He calls in the middle of daily life because that is where trust is proven. Listening in ordinary moments requires humility, because it means accepting that God's voice may come without spectacle. This call to action is an invitation to stop underestimating today. Ordinary days carry extraordinary potential when the heart is open. A single decision made in faith can redirect years of living. A quiet yes to God can unlock doors that striving never could. When hearts choose to listen, routine becomes revelation, and common moments become sacred turning points. Listening is not passive. It demands intention. It requires slowing down, silencing distractions, and choosing reflection over reaction. Many miss destiny because they are always preparing for tomorrow while ignoring what God is saying today. Destiny does not begin in the future, it begins in obedience now. Every act of listening sharpens discernment and strengthens alignment with God's purpose. This call is also a reminder that destiny is not forced, it is followed. God does not drag people into purpose. He invites them. He places guidance before them and waits for response. When hearts listen, movement follows. Listening births courage, because once direction is clear, remaining still becomes harder than stepping forward. Ordinary days test faith more than extraordinary ones. It is easy to trust God when miracles are visible. It is harder to trust Him when nothing appears to be changing. Yet those are the moments when destiny is quietly being shaped. Faithfulness in the unseen prepares the soul for the revealed. This call to action asks for responsiveness, not perfection. God is not waiting for flawless obedience, but for willing hearts. Destiny shifts not when everything is understood, but when trust outweighs fear. One moment of obedience can outweigh years of hesitation. When you listen on ordinary days, you honor the truth that God is always at work, even when life feels repetitive. You recognize that purpose is not hidden in distant dreams, but woven into daily choices. Listening today positions you for tomorrow. So let this be the moment you stop waiting for something extraordinary to happen and begin responding to what God is already saying. Destiny is closer than you think. It is often one quiet decision away, waiting for a heart that chooses to listen and act.